Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm Digital Media Editor Warren Frey. Recently, the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association of British Columbia hosted its partner associations from across the country in Vancouver, and myself and Journal of Commerce staff writer Evan Saunders interviewed the leaders of ICBA BC, the newly formed ICBA Alberta, and the heads of MERIT Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Nova Scotia. We've compiled these interviews here to get you a comprehensive view of the current open shop landscape across Canada. First up is Evan's interview with Chris Gardner, the president of ICBA BC.
What are the feeling among members right now? What was the kind of atmosphere that you felt having everybody in the room last night?
Well, I think that in terms of the construction market, it's been amazingly robust and resilient. We've come through the pandemic in fine form. Really, you'd have to go back to the 2008 financial crisis where there was a significant downturn in construction. Right now, people are feeling very optimistic. They're busy. Now, there are concerns. There's definitely concerns about the geopolitical shifting landscape, Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, China becoming more assertive globally, inflation, high interest rates affecting the global economy. So there's a lot of uncertainty. You couple that with supply chain challenges and the shortage of people, and there's definitely a lot of concern. But that being said, construction is amazingly robust. It's very busy. It remains busy. You talk to contractors, they're working hard, they're dealing with these challenges, but they're busy.
What kind of changes are you forecasting this year? Anything major that you'd like to talk to your constituents about?
Well, I think, one of the interesting things that's happening to all of us, and it's impacting construction, is technology and how technology is impacting our economy as a whole. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, $25 billion has been invested in software applications and technology directly related to construction over the past 5 years. It's about $5 billion a year. Now, that is having an enormous impact. Contractors are starting to rethink how we design buildings, how we build them, the supply chain, how systems are collaborating, robotics, off-site construction, artificial intelligence. All of this is coming together to present tremendous opportunities for improvements and efficiencies in construction and opportunities for young people. If you're a young person considering and you're making career choices and looking at what to do, the trade should be at the top of the list, not at the bottom of the list, where it often has been historically. Mm-hmm. Because if you're interested in technology, great opportunities in construction. If you want to be, an entrepreneur, a business person, learn a skill, learn a trade, and start your own business. And we need to tell that message in a more compelling way to young people and their parents, mm-hmm. so that they understand the enormous opportunities presented by construction.
I was at a really great event last week out in Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows Plumbing. They had a really great technology and youth-focused outreach program. Do you think technology is important when it comes to that youth outreach aspect as well, considering the tech savviness of the newer generation, so to speak?
So I was at that event.
Oh, were you?
I was in the morning. I was there for 4 hours. Yeah, so I was there for 4 hours. So just think of this. It was called The Future of Work. It was sponsored not by Apple, not by Google, not by Microsoft, not by Meta. It was sponsored by Pitt Meadows Plumbing. 2 key takeaways. No one once in the 4 hours there talked about plumbing or being a plumber. Mm-hmm. It's all about technology. And who's the audience? Hundreds of parents and kids coming away inspired and excited about the opportunities of technology in construction. Mm-hmm. And so it was a fascinating event, but that's exactly the message we have to get out there. Mm-hmm. And so Pitt Meadows Plumbing did a great job. I mean, they are one of the leading mechanical contractors in the country. And they're innovative, they're on the leading edge, and they're a great example of talking about construction in a way that's compelling and inspiring for young people.
Now, 2 major issues that, of course, we always have to talk about when we get in these situations: community benefit agreements and prompt payment right now. Particularly, I wanted to know if you were aware of a situation on Vancouver Island right now where some Indigenous contractors were locked out of a project, I believe a hospital redevelopment, by the CBA, even though they were originally supposed to be working on it. Do you have a take on that situation?
Yeah, that's the Cowichan Hospital. Mm-hmm. Being built under a community benefit agreement. And listen, here was the stated goal. We're going to hire more young people, more people from Indigenous communities, more women. But the reality is, the only thing this does is make it harder and more difficult for women, young people, and Indigenous contractors to participate in these projects. Why? Because the simple reality is what the government has done is said you have to be a member of a building trades union. If you are a member of a progressive union like CLAC, like Canada West, like CCWU, you are excluded and frozen out from these projects. If you're a non-union contractor, a non-union employee, you are excluded from these contracts. What does that mean in British Columbia? 85% of construction workers in BC are either members of progressive unions or open shop, non-union. They're not members of the building trade, and 85% of those workers are frozen out of these projects. The implications of that, fewer bidders for these projects, forcing prices up. In the era of historic labor shortages, shortage of people in the workforce, why is the government restricting taxpayer-funded work to 15% of the workforce? Mm-hmm. Everybody should have a fair and open shot at this work. The playing field should be level for every single contractor. Mm-hmm. That's all everyone's asking for, is an equal shot, equal opportunity. No special deals, no special favors for a special interest. And in this case, the government is rewarding the building trades, a special interest that's traditionally supported this government.
And of course, the irony today is that your partner organization is called MERIT. Where's the merit in making these decisions, right? Yeah. How do you make a decision on merit if you can't?
Well, if you think of that, the Indigenous contract you mentioned, John Coleman, this is an entrepreneur, someone from the Cowichan community who is being frozen out and being told he cannot work on this project. That is offensive, it's discriminatory, and it shouldn't stand.
Under the guise of something called a community benefit agreement, right. Nonetheless.
It's a great marketing ploy, but the reality is it's discrimination, it's unfairness, it's hypocrisy, and it's offensive.
Well said. I got two more questions for you, and I'll make them one question. Construction safety and mental health awareness week next week. ICBA doing any initiatives? Anything you'd like to get out there for your constituents?
Well, we started a new mental wellness program designed specifically for construction professionals that we rolled it out about 18 months ago. We offer it free for our members. We have 10,000 people enrolled on the program. And the whole point of the program is very simple. Make it easy for people to start a conversation about mental health. Remove the stigma, the awkwardness, the embarrassment. And so the second phase of that program was a partnership with Corey Hirsch, former NHL goaltender. He wrote a book last year called The Save of My Life. We've done over 75 speaking engagements across the country with Corey Hirsch. A very compelling story about his journey from darkness, the depths of darkness, depression, and despair because of mental health into where he is now, which is a very strong advocate for mental health. So we're going to be promoting our program, the conversations we're having with Corey Hirsch, because we have a wave of mental health challenges that's overwhelming our entire economy. You can see it in our homes, on our streets, in our businesses, and we've got to start those conversations.
Next, I spoke with Mike Gallardo, the head of MERIT Ontario.
The mix of union versus open shop is a little different in Ontario than it is from out here. Right. So maybe you could go into that and how the two sides interact. What's the general tenor of relationship in Ontario between the two sides?
Okay, so it's a bit different than out here, the marketplace out here in BC. Ontario is, there's a heavy concentration of union, I would say, contractors in the Toronto area. A lot of outside of Toronto, it is quite open. There are a lot of contractors that have been around with members of our association for about 50, 60 years. Sorry, they've been in operation for 50, 60 years, and they've been members from day one. We're about 30, I want to say about 35 years old, or close to it. I think been around since 1990. Our goal was always to make sure that we would have a fair fight and a voice for those contractors that were told that they couldn't bid or that they weren't allowed to bid in certain projects. And so the association, we position ourselves to be promoters of all people that want to work on projects. We're not anti-union. We're more about, a lot of employees, some of our members do hire former union members. So it's not about, what we look for is the best and brightest. We try to compete on all projects. There are a few laws that do make it tricky to operate in Ontario. Ontario is one of the, I think perhaps the only jurisdiction in Canada that has card-based certification. I think they have that here now, but automatic certification is a reality in Ontario for construction based on signed union cards. So I think as a contractor, those are things that they're mindful of, and as an association, we try to make them competitive. We invest in health and safety, we invest in training, apprenticeship programs, and we make sure that they have benefits for their employees that are quite competitive. Mm-hmm. So, I think overall, we union contractors, they're competing against our contractors, but at the same time, there's a lot of work out there, and some of our companies are quite specialized in certain areas that don't have that union penetration.
And politically, it doesn't seem as adversarial as out here either, because Doug Ford, no friend of the unions when he was a councillor, but now he's got trade unions backing him. At least they did for his last election, and yet he's probably an ally of yours as well.
Yeah, I think the premier's, I want to say, has done a good job tempering a lot of different, different groups. I think once he got into power, I think he's done a good job. I think, and then the pandemic hit as well. And so I think he's done a great job. I think, he obviously represents all contractors and all different interests. And you can't ignore that, the union contractors and unions are a big element of construction, right? So,
and in terms of just the state of construction in Ontario, like a lot of it's infrastructure because of LRT and all the rest of it. But what else is going on, or just what in general is going on construction-wise?
A lot of infrastructure. You've got the Ford government announced a big push on subways, a big push on transit locally, LRTs, you mentioned it, but also highways and bridges and investments up north in the Ring of Fire. So I think from an infrastructure, there's Toronto, outside of Toronto, it's growing, but new markets are emerging too. You've got the Kitchener-Waterloo area, London area is growing, north of Barrie. So, the Ontario province is growing. They've also, on the peripheral, have made huge investments in the auto sector.
Yeah, just recently too.
And so someone's got to build those buildings, right? So, or at least retrofit the new build. So you've got a lot of stuff on the industrial side. I'd say Ontario is just poised for growth. They're big supporters of the trades, big supporters of businesses thriving, and so I think the challenging part is keeping Ontario workers within the province. One of the things that we're seeing is that Western provinces are aggressively marketing, getting people out of Ontario to migrate out west.
Yeah, I was there in November and I saw the ads too.
Yeah, and they're effective, and I think locally we're trying our best to keep them, but we realize it's a big economy too.
And just in terms of trades, you're involved in training for the government or with the government?
No, so for us, what we do is, I want to say we have government endorsed training. Yeah. For us, we provide online training, virtual reality, a job bank, and the things that we do are more. We want to make sure that we can help the smaller companies outside of, for accessibility reasons. Post-pandemic, a lot of, I want to say, companies have embraced online training, and it's just more efficient. So we've invested a lot in that. The key for us is making sure that a company that is hiring. Some of the youth coming in, at the innovative ways to engage them on training. So we provide competency checks as well on some of our training. So it's actually, it's been well received in the marketplace. A lot of companies really have embraced it, and we're trying to make sure that we not so much meet the standard, but even exceed it.
And as of this recording, next week will be Health and Safety Week, and mental health is a focus there too. So what is MERIT Ontario doing in that regard?
Well, I want to say we just came off the heels of our Wellness Day. We did a Wellness Day. I think in terms of Health and Safety Week, we support all of our members that do on-site projects. A little bit difficult for us to coordinate all of our members. They do it's one of those things that a lot of companies, I think, internally do a safety week internally. They'll bring in guest speakers. As an association, we endorse that. I think to support the association, also to support members, I want to say end of February 20th and March 1st, we did a Wellness Day where we had experts in financial literacy, mental health, and fit for duty, physical health, talk to our member companies to promote that. So yeah, we're big supporters of mental health, big supporters of just, I think, issues that impact contractors and taking care of the well-being of their employees. So, yeah, I think that's how we've been doing it. We're very proactive with our benefit plan as well, but specific, like a full-on week of doing one because of how big the province is and how everyone has their own thing. We kind of take a back seat and let our members kind of do that too. There's a lot of duplication from so many other associations as well.
And finally, you're all out here in BC. Obviously, you're not going to tell me what's going on behind closed doors. But in terms of sort of goals you're setting for Ontario and otherwise, what do you think you guys sort of have in mind for the future?
In terms of Ontario or just...
or both?
I would say like
what you hope to accomplish here and what you hope to accomplish for Ontario.
I mean, we're out here in support of ICBA. I would consider them a sister association. We have a lot in common, a lot of issues that we both have to deal with, and I think it's just building on that relationship. Goals for Ontario, our goal really is to grow, to ensure that contractors know that there is a voice for them, and that we build on that moving forward. I think the construction sector has been pretty busy post-pandemic, and even during the pandemic, it was very busy. But we're doing our part to ensure that they could get quality people. So our workforce development, recruitment programs are trying to help on that end, and also we have an apprenticeship program that we're supporting contractors with, that they could access high quality candidates to help fill that need and to support the apprenticeship system as well. We're doing our part to promote, and I think that in tandem with what we do to help support contractors with services is just to help them become stronger, better, more competitive in the marketplace.
ICBA Alberta has formed just recently, and Evan had an extensive discussion with President Mike Martens about the current open shop situation in Alberta, where an election is weeks away.
How did you get involved with ICBA? How did you guys get the Alberta section going?
Right. Well, first, personally, my background is mostly politics, and so I did a lot of. I worked specifically in politics, and later on I did the training side of politics through something called the Manning Center. And then for the last 8 years, I've been doing government relations for a national association called the Progressive Contractors Association.
I know them well.
So
I'm speaking with Paul later today, actually.
Yeah, good. So I worked for Paul and was their Western Canada Government Relations Director. And during that period, not only did I learn about the construction industry, but I worked closely with ICBA on issues in British Columbia. Paul, Jordan, and Chris are people that I've known historically through politics, but it was really good to get to know them through the construction association side, fighting against issues like community benefits agreements, secret ballot versus card check, advocating for natural resource development like pipelines and other projects like Site C. So we had a great working relationship, and in a way it was maybe an 8-year job interview over that time working with them, and then being really comfortable with how I do GR and how PCA, my understanding of the construction industry. So that was a really natural fit. Now, in terms of why ICBA has moved into Alberta, we had companies in Alberta come to us saying they wanted a stronger advocacy voice there. And so a lot of those companies do work in BC and in Alberta. They cross borders. They're members of ICBA in BC, and they're saying, we need that voice here. So when ICBA started looking in Alberta for somebody who knew construction, could be a strong voice and advocate for smaller and open shop construction companies, I'm honored that they considered me, but that was an obvious avenue to go into.
Very nice. What's the construction forecast right now in Alberta for the year?
Well, it's huge. Alberta in general is expected to lead the country in growth. And that's a wonderful thing. I think partly that growth is because historically Alberta struggled for a long time, especially when oil prices hit the big lows in 14 and 15. That was a big hit. One association went under, not directly due to that, but partly at cost efficiency, but a lot of associations were hit hard through that time. So the growth now is partly as a rebound to that downward trend. But like all sectors, it's firing on all cylinders. There's lots of government projects, something like in the magnitude of $100 billion in the next 5+ years in private investment. So, I mean, it's nothing like the glory years where you're having $120 billion of investment every year. It's not like that, but still, from a national perspective, it's enormous. Unlike the past, though, it's like everywhere in the country is going well. So whereas in the past, thousands of workers from other parts of the country would be flowing into Alberta, that's not happening. Having said that, immigration to Alberta is skyrocketing, and that presents two challenges and opportunities. One is immigrants is international coming in. This is a wonderful opportunity to give them great careers right off the bat. Construction is amazing. Great wages, strong companies, great training, but that also takes a while too. So there will be a delay in the immigration. On the emigration side, total immigration into Alberta is like plus 50,000 in this year. So where are the houses coming from? So Alberta's about to experience a little bit of the pain that Toronto and Vancouver's been experiencing. We're going to have a housing crunch. In the next 5 years, it's going to be really tough to build that. So hopefully we can be part of the solution, encouraging governments to improve the time it takes to approve projects and still do it well, but we're going to need to get it done so that there's affordable housing options for all those people coming in. From the construction industry's perspective, we want to make sure those people know that construction is a viable and enjoyable and worthwhile career for them to go into. So we've got to do a better job of advertising to them, working with governments and other agencies to make sure that we've got career path and training opportunities. And ICBA is going to be in the middle of that solution.
What's the open shop situation like in Alberta?
Well, first of all, the open shop sector in Alberta represents 88% of the industry. There are 22,000 construction companies in the province, many of them single, double operators, but that's embedded in the ICBA name, which means Independent Contractor Businesses Association. So those people are where our heart is. We want to fight for them. We want to make sure that if there's regulations, they don't unnecessarily burden those people. Our benefits and training programs help them be more professional companies and grow and become bigger contributors to the Alberta economy. But as 88% of the economy, so roughly 220 to 230,000 workers in construction, so you're talking in the range of 200,000 of those are non-union, and they need a advocate for them to make sure that the policies that come down don't unduly affect them. I mentioned those regulations. What a lot of government officials don't understand is they're bringing in regulations and they mean the best. They're trying to improve safety. Excellent. They're trying to make sure that underrepresented groups are getting it. That's wonderful. They're trying to make sure, that other well-intended policies are put in place. What they don't realize is the owner is often the driver, the welder, the accountant, the HR official, the marketing person. They're everything. And those 10 forms you just added onto them, they're already at 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And whereas if you put that on a company that has an HR department, well, they've got a staff person who just fills out those forms. And so the understanding, we're trying to embed in the understanding of the average government and even owner firms. So governments is an owner of projects, so are, of course, private companies, helping them understand that if you want more competitive bidding, you've got to either make those regulations very easy to fill out or find ways to alleviate that burden on smaller companies. Or we would say, frankly, most of the regulations are unhelpful and unnecessary. When I say most, there are many. And so we're trying to raise that awareness and fight for the small guys for whom the crazy burden, regulatory burden right now is either putting them out of business or preventing them from bidding. So on the one hand, government wants lower bidders, but they increase regulations that makes it impossible for the more competitive companies to come in and help bring the cost down.
Could you give me an example about maybe what some of those regulations might be that are causing problems in Alberta?
The most heinous form of this is in BC. It's the community benefits agreements that restrict that everybody who works on those projects has to be part of building trades. And they say, anybody can bid on it. I mean, this issue has been talked to almost death now. They say anybody can bid on it, But if you are a non-union construction company, you have organized in a particular manner. Your whole business model is based on your workers being able to do certain procedures. You have relationships with those workers. And then all of a sudden you're saying, no, you're not allowed to organize your business that way. And you're not only that, you're not even allowed to use half the workers that you have. This is insane. Now, there are large companies that could do it. They hate it, but they can do it. And they're resentfully going, okay, well, if they're going to force us to do it. But you've just eliminated, in Alberta's case, 88% of the industry. Now, they haven't brought CBAs to Alberta yet.
Which is my next thing.
Exactly.
This open letter that you guys have sent to Rachel Notley. You're concerned about some of the support of CBAs and double-breasting, I believe was the other term. And while you've already talked about it a bit, can you pick up from there? What are the concerns that you guys have with a possible Notley government right now?
Yeah, okay, so those are the two biggest issues. If you go back in time 8 years when they first got in, they brought in, let's just say somewhere between a dozen and 20 policies, what you might vaguely call labor-friendly policies. Were they heinous? No. But they're annoying. And again, they ignore the changes that they make on smaller companies. But let's even just say one example of just the presupposition of the NDP seems to be, and honestly, I felt they worked really hard to listen. We went in and talked to them, and they backed off a number of them. One example of that was that they wanted the time workers were paid to start when they got onto buses that took them to Fort Mac. It depends on where the place is, but let's say it's an hour drive. Okay, so the company's providing this bus ride, and you want the company to charge them. A lot of people go, well, yeah, if you're on the company bus, you should be getting paid per hour. Well, here's the option. The company not provide the buses, and all those workers have to drive up there in dangerous conditions after a 12-hour shift. And where are they going to park? How long will it take for them to walk from where they're parking to the place? And how much time is that? So the NDP think they're fighting for workers, but they don't understand the work environment that they're putting the policy on. And that's just normal. Maybe assume at the start, and this is where the open shop and progressive contractors environment says, look, workers have valid interests and need to be listened to. Companies have valid interests and need to be listened to. We don't get that. On the NDP, it seems that management is inherently selfish and just out to harm workers. Well, that wouldn't. If everybody's like that, the workers would leave that company and go for one that was more generous, kind, and a better place to work. So we believe that the average company, the vast majority of them, really cares for their workers, wants the best for them. Is there area to work to improve? Yes. And ICBA is central to that. We help them provide benefits for their workers, help them provide training. We have an amazing wellness program, including a national talk series with former NHL goalie and Olympic silver medalist Corey Hirsch. We are trying to do the best to help our companies treat their workers well, to help retrain and recruit them, and make them the best companies as possible. What are we concerned about? That they're going to, so they got in, implemented some of those. We helped them understand that, and so they did pull back on some of those. But now we're wondering, did they only pull back because they wanted to appear moderate? And sometimes when governments get a second chance and they're going, you know what, like in British Columbia, they go hardcore. And so already she's sending signals, bringing in BC CBAs, more restricted tendering. We're going, this is not sounding moderate at all, at least for the construction industry perspective. Perhaps, maybe on oil and gas, they will be moderate. I'm not sure if moderate will help the oil and gas industry. I think you probably need a pretty strong voice because you're fighting federal government bureaucracy and regulations that make Canada the most difficult place in the country to work. I'm not sure that that's a reputation Canada wants. We can be incredibly environmentally responsible and promote development. And yet it seems that every few years, governments are finding ways to add regulatory burden, add paperwork, add restrictions. And we're already the toughest. Why do you feel you need to go further? So these are the trends that we're worried about with the NDP government. We found them reasonable last time. I hope they'll be reasonable if they get elected. But we're ready to defend the right of open shop companies to have free market access, have access to all work, and we're going to do that regardless of the government that's in.
would you see a way for CBAs to be introduced in Alberta, or is the idea that's not going to work here because we're too much open shop?
Look,
it's going to count out
CBAs are not an inherently bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is the heinous. I believe there's an Orwellian term that means you name something that's actually the opposite of what it is.
Doublespeak.
Doublespeak, and there's another word for calling it, like it says it's a community benefit agreement when it's really not.
Yeah,
it's really a restrictive project labor agreement. And so then why don't you call that? Well, they call it the thing because they want it to be palatable. So doublespeak is part of that. There's another term there though that, and we'll find it to you later. Pretend I said it.
In some ways, I would say it's a little euphemistic, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you're
totally
trying to soften this idea and change the meaning by doing so.
Yeah. So community benefits can be a good thing. Now, personally, I believe that when a bridge is built in a community, it is benefiting the community. The project is a community benefit. Having said that, I think every construction company would love to hire workers from the local community instead of having to bring people out and the long travel and having to pay daily wages, stipends, and all that kind of stuff, hotel costs. They would love to do that. I think the problem is a lot of people putting these policies together have never worked in a construction-like environment where your project is in a different place every week or month, that the workers flow between companies. I call it's mobile, it's transitory, and it's temporary, right? So a lot of the workers, a huge percentage of the workforce work for multiple companies. Everybody in the industry works at different sites. Nobody works at the same site all the time. So these are the transitory, it's temporary. The projects don't have infinite. It's not manufacturing. We're going to see this manufacturing plant for the next 50 or 100 years. It's 3 months, and then you're going to go work for another project for a couple weeks, and then you might have a week off. And this is the reality of construction that policymakers have zero clue about. And frankly, in the construction industry, we don't even realize we need to educate them about that. We breathe that air. And so to us, it's, well, of course. Now, for me, coming from outside, coming into construction later in my life, I saw right away, because holy cow, this is a very difficult industry to work within for all of these non-stable factors, the fluid nature of construction, I call it. And so educating people. So could you do a CBA and do it well within construction? Possibly. I would say that if you're trying to take people who are at risk, what they need more than anything else is stability, construction is probably not the best sector for them. Are there some stable jobs in construction? Great. And I think construction has shown time and again we're willing and ready to step up to the plate and help people who need help. Frankly, we also need workers. The question really should be, though, is construction the best for the group you're looking at? I think construction more than ever is a great place for normal, healthy individuals of all races, of all communities, and of all genders. More than ever. If they are, however, at-risk communities, that needs to be handled very specially. It should not be glibly just like, oh, you have an addiction issue, go work in construction. That might be a recipe for disaster because construction's fluid nature is not the stability those people maybe need. People aren't asking those questions. They're just shoving it onto construction. And the reason I think that is, it's not because construction is actually well suited. It's because they control the levers. As a government funder, you control the funding of major infrastructure projects and you can dictate the terms.
You can create a CBA, which has to be lived up to, or else guess what? You're not doing this job.
So you're forcing it because you've got the ability to think you look good by forcing it upon something that isn't well suited to it. So, and you know, I've developed a number of concepts on what a good CBA might look like, and a number of organizations I've worked with that put these papers out. And one of those concepts is anything you're asking the construction industry to do, are you doing that internally? You know, right now, for instance, I helped Paul put a presentation together a couple of years ago when he was speaking to an international labor conference in Edmonton. And we found the stats data that something like, forgive me if my numbers are slightly off, but let's say the Indigenous population in Alberta is 6%. Well, guess what percent of the Alberta construction industry is Indigenous? 7%. So you could argue that Indigenous people are overrepresented in construction. Now, does that mean we don't want more? We'd be happy to have more. but don't say that we're not doing our share in helping Indigenous people get employed. It's just not true. The stats don't show it.
It becomes plain politics, right? I mean, you're signaling to something that might not necessarily actually be the case because it looks good for your party.
Well, not only that, I feel like the construction industry becomes a whipping boy and a punching bag for whatever policy. Trudeau threw out some very irresponsible comments roughly a year ago when he was talking about a gender-based analysis because of harms against women in construction. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there have been harms, and those women need to be taken care of and properly protected. But there's horrible things happening to women in every city. Are we banning cities? No, it's because bad stuff happens everywhere.
It needs to be nuanced, right?
And
when you throw away the nuance.
And it labeled the whole industry. There are 99 out of 100 companies who have incredibly strong policies protecting women and making sure they're safe and welcome to the constructions. And then they label the whole industry based on one bad actor. I think that's unfair. Can we do better? Sure. But this ease of beating on the construction sector for your political gains has to stop.
I also spoke with Paul Dube, the president of MERIT Nova Scotia, about what's happening in Atlantic Canada.
What is the current open shop versus union situation in Nova Scotia? Out here, it's pretty open shop, but I don't know if that's the case in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, it is actually. It's roughly 75% open shop versus closed shop or union side. So
okay, and
we represent quite a bit.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. As a smaller province, just how much is there at play there for these two sides to work on?
Yeah, so it's, I think if the question is like, do we work well together or we don't? There's enough activity from a construction perspective in Nova Scotia that we can all play in the same sandbox, so to speak. The construction sector itself, we collaborate with both unions and non-union stakeholders. We have to. We're a small group. We all have the same challenges. We're all looking for people. We're all dealing with high inflation costs. We're all dealing with the supply chain issues. So we do talk to each other and we do work together as much as we can.
You just mentioned a few of the problems. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing in Nova Scotia?
Labor and talent really is. So we're trying to do new things as much as we can. Reaching out to underrepresented groups is a little bit more of a challenge at times. Immigration, our population in Nova Scotia has actually exploded over the last number of years. We topped over 1 million people.
Was that due to the pandemic? A lot of people moving to Nova Scotia? I know
there was certainly a huge influence. We saw a lot of people coming in and buying houses, low inventory, but high demand. Which is creating now a housing crisis and a bit of a crunch for those that are coming in. But yeah, it was the pandemic. We had a lot of initiatives with the Newfoundland or the Nova Scotia government going out and just promoting the province as well, overseas and different markets. Construction being one sector. There's healthcare that's really short on people. The restaurants associations, all those interest groups are looking for people. We're all kind of conflicted about how do we do it.
And the other side of the coin of that is there's more people there, so there's more jobs, so there's more to draw from, I would assume, as well.
Yeah, and how do we keep them with a roof over their heads? And so the construction sector itself is really busy trying to get ahead of the demand.
Okay, and apparently you've got a wellness initiative, so maybe you could, that kind of ties into the pandemic. A lot of people are sort of responding to what we just went through with wellness initiatives.
Yeah, so it's something, within construction we've always dealt with a sprained arm or a fracture or something like that. But when we're talking about the mind and the mental awareness and whatnot, it's something that's really hasn't been tackled. In Nova Scotia, we did launch our workplace wellness program in November. So currently we've got 500 people that are actually workers out in the field that are actually accessing those tools. And the one thing that we keep hearing back from contractors about the positiveness of it is that it's a structure. It's something for them that there's nothing off the shelf that talks about mental wellness and awareness. And then we've given them the tools now to be able to have those toolbox talks. It generates conversations. And that's all we want to do is just have a conversation. It's a male-dominated industry. We don't typically bring our feelings to the work site.
Nope.
And if you do,
yeah,
it usually isn't well received. So it's been a great project. The folks, our partners here in BC with ICBA have been fabulous to work with, and they've really did a lot of the groundwork, and they've allowed us to launch it in Nova Scotia.
Now, and ICBA here, I don't know about you guys, but ICBA here are no shrinking violets when it comes to advocacy for their members. So what do you guys do? And also part of this is politics. What's the political situation in Nova Scotia, and what's your sort of position within that?
Yeah, so we've got a few hot files. One is workers' compensation. Our system is lacking with regards to national averages when it comes to return to work timeframes. The cost of the premiums to employers is much higher than any other province. So we're asking for an independent review. We've joined a very strong coalition of the largest employers in Nova Scotia, which includes the Irvings, Michelin, Shanix, Municipal Group, CFIB, and ourselves. And we're just talking about the need for change and to get serious about making that system better. The second item is around our Trade Union Act, which really manages the certification process of a workplace. There's a different set of rules for construction, and it's unfair. It's archaic. So when a certification application comes in for a contractor, if the employee is not physically on the job site that particular day, they don't get a cut. They don't get a vote. They don't get a say. We need to change that. Every other industry in Nova Scotia is aligned with that. So from a political landscape, we've got a very progressive leader with Tim Houston. He's a conservative government. The Liberals were in place for probably 3 terms before he came in, but he's got he understands our issues, but he's got bigger problems. Healthcare is probably the biggest one on his plate right now, and we're just trying to get a bit of his time, and it seems to actually be working, at least resonating with him about what we're doing.
And just in terms of prompt payment, that's there's a lot of advocacy here for that. It's already happening in a few places. Is it happening, or where is it at?
So we're actually involved with other construction industry partners about working on the regulations around it. So we do have an act. It's been implemented. Now it's just getting the regulations in place, and I think we should have that by the fall sitting.
Okay. Any further thoughts to the future of Open Shop in Nova Scotia?
Well, it's a great place. We're going to be 30 years young in 2024, so we welcome everyone and anyone to come over and visit us at any time.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, you're welcome.
Evan also spoke with both Graham Snell, the head of MERIT Saskatchewan, and Yvette Milner, the president of MERIT Manitoba.
Congratulations. I believe you're pretty new.
I'm 5 months in.
5 months in?
Brand spanking new.
Nice. So tell me how to come about and how the first 5 months been for you.
It's been really good. It's a pretty big learning curve. I do have a background in the construction industry. I started out my career in construction before changing, but it's good to be back. It's good to be, I love the people of the industry, good, hardworking people.
What made you want to get involved with MERIT?
Just everything MERIT stands for, the open shop and the free enterprise. And the biggest things for me, our association, we provide the benefits and we have these member services, but what I am most passionate about is that advocacy piece. And making sure that the procurement, there's jobs. First of all, there's buildings for people to build, and then there's people to build those buildings. And then the biggest thing for me is the mental health piece.
Nice.
Mental health in construction, and making sure everybody knows that they can get help and for all that.
Yeah. So that's perfect timing because it's Mental Health Awareness and Construction Safety Week next week nationally. You guys doing any initiatives, or how do you think companies should be approaching these issues?
Well, we have a workplace wellness program. Right now we're doing a pilot, kind of a pilot project with WCB, psychological wellness. And then the biggest thing for us in this construction is we want to make sure that, like these guys, right, these big, strong, tattoo guys, they have a voice. They can be heard. They can ask for help, and no one's going to ridicule them. No one's going to make fun of them. They just need to be able to know that they can be safe to open up. Because there's just that tough macho chest beating bullshit. We can put that stuff aside.
I totally got you. Yeah. It's, there's a stigma, and it's not just an outside stigma, often a personal stigma, right? It's hard to sometimes reach out for help.
Absolutely.
And to know that you're going to get a positive response from your employer even.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. We want all our members to do that. We want to help them create programs. We want to support them and make sure that everybody knows that they can reach out.
Nice. What's the outlook for the industry right now in Saskatchewan?
Luckily for us, we're 83% non-union, which is good. So our members are free to bid on any contracts they want. There's always stuff going on. The biggest one is there's projects, but there's not people. labor shortages
Yeah.
everywhere. So we need people to work on the project. So labor shortage. But I think the outlook is pretty good. There's a lot of residential and commercial construction going up, and I think the outlook is good for this year.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was Manitoba who recently introduced prompt payment. Does Saskatchewan have prompt payment?
We do have prompt payment.
How long has that been in the books for?
It was introduced last year.
Yeah.
Or so. I got to be honest, I don't know much about it.
Was that a big piece of advocacy for you guys, or for the industry in general before it got implemented?
I think the industry in general, not for MERIT so much. I think maybe MERIT probably needs to get into it and be aware of it so we can support our members in it. But it wasn't a big thing for us.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations on almost 30 years for MERIT in Manitoba. When you're looking back on, I guess, 29 years at this point of your organization, any advocacy points or accomplishments that you're particularly proud of and stand out in all that time?
Well, it was before my time, but probably the biggest challenge we had was a legal challenge that had to do with the open tendering and Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That was probably several years. And we, at the end of the time, or at the end of the day, the court didn't really address the merits of the case. It was just kind of a technical, it should be in the labor board as opposed to in the courts. And we didn't pursue it because the government changed, and they, and this was during my time, we advocated heavily on that policy, and the current Conservative government implemented it.
Mm-hmm. And of course, recent accomplishments, having prompt payment recently introduced in Manitoba.
Second reading.
That must have been an exciting moment for you guys.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. So it's an amendment to the Builders Liens Act, and that kind of adds prompt payment into it. So we'll be presenting at those hearings in the next few weeks. And
have they set the date for the second reading yet?
They've had the
Last
second
time
reading.
I checked, they had. Oh, they did already have it? Okay.
Okay, and but now I guess we have an opportunity to present.
Very nice. What's the state of the industry right now in Manitoba?
We were just talking about that earlier. There's lots and lots of, infrastructure projects. Really, the issue for us is labor. When I ask my members, what's the biggest issue? It's not the work, it's the not having skilled labor. So that's a challenge for every industry, but that seems to be the...
Are you seeing Manitoba tackle that the labor issues in any meaningful way, or do you have any ways that you think it should be getting done?
Well, I mean, we've got... I think that there is, there's funding of the colleges. I think we should be handling more through immigration, actually. And obviously there are kind of initiatives to attract people to the trades. And I think all the associations are working on that. Government, not so much. But
could be nice to see some more public push to try and solve those issues. Yeah, very nice. And what's the open shop situation like in Manitoba? I'm not really sure what the numbers are.
It's 70% open shop versus building trades. And under this Conservative government, we have a seat at the table at everything. So yeah, I mean, we're the huge part of the industry. But we have seen union activity increasing, and I think that's probably in anticipation of the election in the fall. And a lot of people anticipate that the government might change. We hope that's not the case.
I think there's a pretty big NDP presence in Manitoba. Next to, it's not the Liberal Party, right? It's MDP, I do believe.
Yeah, the Liberal Party is maybe got 2 people in that house. But yeah, no, it's Winnipeg is a union town, like in terms of teachers, healthcare, government. But the construction sector is mostly non-union. Yeah.
How long have you been in your position here?
I have been there since 2016. So I guess 7 years.
What's the big point of advocacy now for you guys beyond maybe labor, since prompt payment's been covered off?
You know what? If the government changes, it'll be open tendering and all of that. We still have that message going out. And there's also CBAs with the City of Winnipeg, which are really PLAs in disguise. So that's something that we have been involved in terms of advisory. But other than that, it's basically servicing our members.
Very good. Speaking of servicing your members, next week is Mental Health Awareness and Construction Safety Week. Just wondering if you guys have any initiatives that I could mention in the article.
Not next week, but we do have a wellness session coming up in a couple of weeks with Corey Hirsch.
Oh, nice.
So it's a wellness day. We have an addictions expert. We've got Corey Hirsch and at a hotel. And so we really are emphasizing that message. And it's a huge issue in construction, as you probably know. And we've had Corey out before, and it was very well received. And some of our members have them coming out. So all good.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, no, I don't think we don't have any event planned for next week, but we certainly are aware and promote to our members.
Very good. Creating that space, I've heard, for having those conversations with your employer to be able to say, I need a little bit of support here.
Yeah, for sure.
It's very important.
And so we have a new wellness program or initiative that was developed through ICBA. And so we have rolled that out to our members. And that's basically providing different resources with respect to mental health and, where to go for this or that. And, a different topic each month. And we also rolled out an HR toolkit for our members, which is really based on our laws in our province. And so we provided a toolkit for our members that they can kind of adapt for their own use. Very well received.
Why is it important for you to make sure that these initiatives are taking place or to engage in wellness checks?
Wellness checks?
Not wellness checks, but making sure that people your constituents are looking out for the well-being and the mental health of their employees.
Well, because, obviously if you want to retain labor, you need a mentally healthy workplace. And if we find that in our benefit plan, the increase is really in those drugs that are related to anxiety, depression, that kind of thing. So it's important. It has also been requested by our members.
That's it for this episode of the Construction Record Podcast. You can listen to us on Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Spotify, and at the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening.